A word of warning before we begin. Do not watch this alone. This investigation covers folklore that is still practiced, sealed local accounts, and locations where strange nocturnal activity has never been fully explained. The place we're talking about today, a certain village, doesn't appear on most maps. It sits right at the edge of a dense forest in rural Japan, a place where the trees grow unnaturally close together, and the sunlight seems to vanish hours before it should. Outsiders who pass through describe it as quiet, but the locals, they describe it as obedient. For generations, an unspoken rule governed the village's most sacred ritual, death. Here, the dead were never buried, facing the forest. Every single grave was deliberately turned away, angled back toward the village. This wasn't a sign of respect, and it wasn't just a tradition. It was born from pure, unadulterated fear. The elders passed down a rule so strict, it was never written down, only whispered from one generation to the next. The belief was that if the dead were buried facing the correct direction, they would try to walk home. Imagine that for a moment. The stillness of a rural night, broken by the sound of something you shouldn't be hearing. Early records, dating back to the late Edo period, are filled with unsettling accounts. Villagers reported hearing footsteps on the dirt paths just after a burial. Doors would rattle in their frames for no reason. Dogs, normally brave, would refuse to leave their homes, cowering inside. People claimed to see shadows moving between the houses, slow, upright, human-shaped figures gliding through the darkness. At first, it was easy to find rational explanations. It was just grief playing tricks on the mind. Or maybe it was animals moving around in the dark. Or perhaps just the wind. But there was one problem with that last theory. The forest itself never made any noise. It was unnaturally silent. Hunters who knew the area well wrote about something even stranger. They said the woods went completely silent right after sunset. No crickets, no birds, nothing. Only the chilling sound of movement where no one was supposed to be standing. One account, a particularly disturbing one, describes a funeral that was conducted incorrectly. A sudden landslide had forced a hurried burial, and in the chaos, a terrible mistake was made. The grave marker was accidentally placed facing the forest. That very night, 3 villagers vanished without a trace. Their footprints were found the next morning, leading away from their homes and straight toward the trees. No bodies were ever recovered. After that incident, the unwritten rule became an ironclad law. Grave markers were meticulously checked every single night for weeks following a burial. If one had shifted, even by a fraction of an inch, it was corrected before dusk fell. Children were warned sternly never to play near the cemetery, though they were never told the terrifying reason why. And outsiders, they were kept in the dark, left to wonder about the village's strange customs. Some of the most unsettling reports were eventually sealed away by local authorities, hidden from public view. By the early 20th century, as Japan modernized, officials from the city dismissed the stories as mere superstition, the ramblings of an isolated, uneducated community, but the evidence suggests otherwise. Construction records from that period show repeated, unexplained delays whenever work crews approached the edge of the forest. Workers would pack up their tools and leave the moment the sun began to set, refusing to stay a minute longer. They all claimed the same thing. They felt like they were being watched from the tree line. We managed to uncover a few of these sealed documents. One is a police report from 1928. A traveling merchant had gone missing after staying overnight in the village. His horse and cart were found abandoned on the road, but he was gone. The official cause was listed as disoriented in the woods, but a handwritten note in the margin from the local constable tells a different story. It reads, "The new grave by the old shrine was disturbed, facing the trees." The constable doesn't elaborate, but the implication is chilling. The merchant wasn't just lost, he was led astray. Another story comes from a woman who grew up in the village in the 1950s. She shared an account from her grandmother. One night, as a child, her grandmother awoke to the sound of scratching at her window. Peeking through the paper screen, she saw a figure standing outside, a man she recognized. He had been buried just 2 days prior. He wasn't moving, just standing there, his head tilted slightly, his eyes fixed on the house. Her family spent the rest of the night huddled together in the main room, listening to the scratching sound until dawn. The next morning, they found long, deep gouges in the wooden window frame. This brings us to the core of the belief. What exactly is it that the villagers fear will come home? It's not a ghost in the traditional sense. It's not a spirit that haunts a location. The folklore speaks of the physical body, the empty vessel, being compelled to return. Driven by a primal, residual memory of home, it pulls itself from the earth and begins to walk. It's a slow, mindless journey, not driven by malice, but by a deep, instinctual pullback to the place it once lived. The fear isn't of an attack, but of a reunion. Imagine opening your door to find a loved one you just buried, standing on your doorstep, their eyes empty, their clothes caked in dirt. What do you do? How do you react? This is why the direction of the grave is so critical. By facing them toward the village, it's as if you're giving them a map, a direct path to follow. By turning them away, you are intentionally disorienting them, forcing them to face an endless, silent sea of trees with no path to follow. The forest acts as a barrier, a labyrinth from which the walking dead cannot escape. They wander among the silent trees until their physical forms decay and return to the earth, lost forever. Even today, these practices continue, while younger generations may not hold the same deep-seated fear as their ancestors. The tradition is maintained out of respect, and perhaps a lingering sliver of caution. Outsiders who buy property near the village are sometimes given a friendly but firm piece of advice from their elderly neighbors. If you plant a garden, make sure the rows face away from the woods. The reason is never explained, but the message is clear. Don't give anything a path that leads to your door. So, is this just a fascinating piece of local folklore? A cautionary tale designed to keep children away from a dangerous forest? Or is there something more to it? The consistency of the accounts over centuries, the sealed official reports, and the palpable fear that still lingers in this quiet corner of Japan suggests that something truly unsettling happened here. The village remains unnamed to protect its residents, but the story serves as a chilling reminder. Some rules aren't meant to be broken. Some traditions exist for a reason, and some doors are best left unopened. When you bury the dead, be very, very careful which way they're facing. You never know who might try to come home. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into the shadows. If you found this investigation as unnerving as I did, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next journey into the unknown. Stay safe, and whatever you do, don't look back. Not towards the rising sun or a nearby church, but turned deliberately, as if in defiance of the trees. This isn't just an odd local custom. The villagers say it's a necessary precaution, a form of containment. According to their oldest stories, this tradition began centuries ago, after a series of events so unsettling they were never written down, only passed from one generation to the next in hushed tones. The legend speaks of the first turning. Long ago, the graves were arranged in a traditional manner, but one winter, a sickness swept through the village, swift and mysterious. Those who passed were buried, but the forest, it seemed, didn't want to let them rest. People began hearing strange noises from the cemetery after dark, the sound of earth being disturbed, whispers carried on the wind that sounded like the voices of the recently departed. Then, one morning, a hunter discovered something that made his blood run cold. Every new grave had been turned. They were no longer facing east, but were now oriented towards the forest, as if answering a call from within the trees. The village elder at the time, a woman said to have an understanding of the old ways, declared that the forest was trying to claim their dead. It wanted to pull their spirits into its depths, to make them a part of its ancient, unknowable consciousness. She decreed that, from that day forward, all who were buried must be placed with their backs to the forest, their tombstones acting as shields, a final act of turning away from whatever lurked in the darkness. They believed this would sever the connection, protecting the souls of their loved ones from being drawn into the woods. For a time, it seemed to work. The strange noises ceased, and a fragile peace settled over the village. But the forest is patient, and it never forgets. Fast forward to today. The village holds on to its traditions, but the fear remains, a constant, low hum beneath the surface of daily life. Modern witnesses describe the same unsettling patterns that their ancestors feared. Footsteps near the forest after dark, crunching on the path when no one is there. The distinct sound of gravel shifting between grave markers, as if someone is pacing, waiting, and that pervasive, prickling feeling of being observed from behind. A gaze you can't see but can feel on the back of your neck. One caretaker, a man who had worked at the cemetery for over 20 years, shared a story he'd only ever told his wife. One evening, while locking the gates, just as dusk settled, he heard his name spoken from the trees. It wasn't a stranger's voice. It was a voice he knew better than his own. It was his father's voice. The problem was, his father had been buried in that very cemetery 10 years earlier. The caretaker didn't run. He just stood there, frozen, until the sun had completely vanished, before slowly backing away, never turning his back to the woods. His story isn't unique. Several years ago, after a spike in reported activity, a small group of paranormal investigators received quiet permission to set up equipment. They installed thermal cameras for one night, positioning them to overlook the cemetery from a safe distance. What they captured was never officially released, but rumors leaked out, as they always do. The footage allegedly showed cold shapes, vaguely human in form, moving against the natural flow of the wind, drifting from the edge of the forest towards the graves. The local authorities confiscated the footage the next morning, citing some obscure bylaw, and the investigation was shut down. The official report was never released. But perhaps the most terrifying phenomenon is what the villagers call the night of the turning graves. It doesn't happen often, maybe once every decade or so, but when it does, the entire village holds its breath. They wake up in the morning to find that the markers have moved. Not all of them, but a select few. They have been rotated slowly, deliberately, and are now facing the homes of the village. There are never any drag marks in the soil, no signs of machinery or vandalism, no footprints of animals or people. The heavy stones are just oriented differently. When this happens, the village does not sleep. For the next few nights, every light stays on. Doors are bolted, windows are locked. No one answers their phone or a knock at the door after sunset. The streets are completely deserted. The locals say this is a sign. It means the forest is returning something, or someone, that the souls it once tried to claim are now being sent back as emissaries, their silent gazes a warning. The graves facing the homes are a message. We are watching. Officially, there are no records of deaths directly tied to the cemetery's strange occurrences. But when you look at the village's history, you find something just as chilling: the missing persons. People who simply vanished. There was a school teacher new to the area who disappeared after walking home past the tree line one evening. A teenager who, on a dare, went to visit the graves alone at midnight and was never seen again. In every case, search teams found no signs of a struggle, no evidence of foul play. All they found were footprints that led to the edge of the forest and then abruptly stopped, as if the person had been lifted straight into the air. Those who claim to have seen figures in or around the cemetery describe them in the same haunting way. They aren't decayed, skeletal monsters. They aren't gruesome apparitions. They are just human silhouettes, standing where they shouldn't be, in the faint moonlight, near the tree line, or sometimes even closer. Just standing there, facing the village, utterly still. The elders insist the dead do not attack. They don't have to. They just wait. Their purpose is unknown. Are they guardians? Are they prisoners of the forest? Or are they lures, meant to draw the living into the same shadowy embrace that took them? No one knows for sure, and no one is brave enough to find out. The villagers understand that some boundaries are not meant to be crossed, and some questions are not meant to be answered. So, if you ever find yourself in a remote village, and you notice a cemetery where the graves are turned away from a dark, imposing forest, Do not ask the locals why. Do not let your curiosity get the better of you, and stay after sunset. And above all, if you're walking nearby and you hear the sound of footsteps behind you, never, ever turn to look. Keep walking, because some traditions are not symbolic gestures for the dead. They are measures of containment for the living. Thanks for joining us in the shadows. If this story sent a shiver down your spine, be sure to subscribe to Tales of the Dark, where every story is a new nightmare waiting for you.